The moment I stepped through those heavy courtroom doors, the entire energy of the room shifted. My daughter Natalie let out a nervous laugh from the front row, completely unaware of what was about to unfold. My son-in-law Marcus went rigid in his seat, the color draining from his face in real time. The judge, who had been conducting proceedings with calm authority just seconds before, visibly stiffened. His hands trembled slightly as he leaned toward his clerk and murmured, "Is that actually him?" Every head in that courtroom turned at once. A heavy, collective silence fell over the room the instant people saw my face. Not a single person there knew who I really was, or what I was capable of. Welcome to Behind Dad. If you're drawn to real stories involving family betrayal, buried secrets, dramatic courtroom moments, and justice that actually arrives, subscribe right now and turn on notifications. The twist at the center of this story is one you will not see coming. Stay with me. It only intensifies from here. This story begins nearly 2 years before that morning in court, when my daughter Natalie married Marcus. From every visible angle, he appeared to be exactly what a father hopes for. Polished, articulate, well-presented, and consistently saying the right things at every family gathering. He arrived with flowers, offered to help around the house, and performed the role of devoted husband and attentive son-in-law with apparent ease. But certain details continued to surface that I couldn't dismiss. The luxury watches and tailored clothing that didn't align with his stated income. The extended business trips during which he became entirely unreachable for days at a time. The practiced way he redirected any conversation that ventured too close to his background or personal history. None of it was enough to act on, but all of it was enough to notice. I kept my unease private. Natalie was radiantly happy, fully committed to the future she was building with this man. She looked at him the way you hope your child will someday look at someone who truly deserves them. I had no intention of disturbing that without something concrete. But the instinct wouldn't quiet down. So, quietly, without telling anyone, I began looking into him on my own. What I uncovered over the following months was far beyond what I had prepared myself to find. Marcus wasn't hiding minor secrets or telling convenient lies. He was operating a sophisticated, wide-reaching fraud network, systematically stealing from ordinary families, draining retirement savings, and executing fake investment schemes with calculated precision. Several of his victims were people we knew personally, people who had trusted him. When law enforcement eventually built a sufficient case and placed him under arrest, the trial drew significant attention. Natalie stood by him in the early days, convinced it was all a terrible misunderstanding, that the man she loved couldn't be responsible for what they were describing. She defended him with everything she had. She didn't yet know what I knew, and she didn't know what I had been quietly preparing for this moment. As I walked steadily down the center aisle toward the witness stand that morning, dark suit, measured pace, expression composed, every eye in the room tracked me. The silence was the kind that has weight to it. For the previous 23 years, I had lived a deliberately quiet life in our small town in Michigan. I coached youth soccer on Saturday mornings, restored old motorcycles in the garage, attended every recital and school production Natalie was ever part of, and focused entirely on being the kind of father she could depend on without reservation. Nobody in our neighborhood, not our closest friends, not our extended family, knew anything about the life I had walked away from. Before I became the familiar, unhurried man people waved to across the fence, I had spent nearly 2 decades as one of the most effective federal prosecutors in the region. I had built and won cases against major fraud operations, organized financial crime networks, and corrupt executives who believed their resources made them untouchable. It was consuming, important work, and it had come with real personal costs. After years of it, I made a deliberate choice to step away completely and give my daughter a childhood that had nothing to do with that world. Marcus had no idea whose family he had entered. When the trial opened, his defense attorney carried himself with the confidence of someone who expected little resistance. He had assessed the situation. A quiet suburban father with no visible profile, and decided the prosecution's star witness was manageable. What he saw when I entered the courtroom was something else entirely. The judge recognized me the moment I crossed the threshold. We had worked alongside each other on several significant cases 20 years earlier. He had watched me dismantle fraud operations far more elaborate than the one currently being prosecuted in his courtroom. That history was why his composure fractured, and why the room responded to his reaction before anyone fully understood why. I settled into the witness stand and held Marcus's gaze directly. Whatever remained of his composure began visibly dissolving. Natalie sat in the front row, her expression caught somewhere between confusion, fear, and something she wasn't yet ready to name. I spoke clearly and without urgency. I walked the court through the evidence I had assembled across months of careful, quiet work. Detailed financial records tracking the movement of stolen funds, private correspondence revealing the mechanics of the scheme, offshore account documentation, and recorded conversations that established intent beyond any reasonable argument. The lead prosecutor presented each document in sequence. With every exhibit, Marcus appeared smaller and more cornered. His attorney objected repeatedly, each time with diminishing effect. The judge dismissed every attempt with a precision that communicated exactly where the proceedings were headed. The tension in that room was electric. No one had anticipated that the soft-spoken father sitting in the gallery each morning was the same man who was now systematically destroying a defense that had seemed unassailable days earlier. As my testimony continued, the full weight of Marcus's conduct became impossible to minimize. I outlined how he had methodically targeted elderly couples, fabricated entire investment portfolios, created shell companies to obscure the movement of funds, and, the detail that broke Natalie completely, had used her personal identification and financial credentials to open fraudulent accounts without her knowledge or consent. Tears moved silently down her face as each layer of truth arrived. Marcus kept shaking his head and whispering urgently to his attorney, but the exits had all been closed. The judge continued glancing in my direction throughout, not with suspicion, but with a quiet, evident respect that was not lost on anyone observing closely. The bailiff, the court recorder, even the gallery staff wore expressions of people witnessing something they hadn't expected to be part of that day. Marcus's mother wept audibly from the back of the room. His father sat with his eyes fixed on the floor, unmoving. I remained composed throughout, professionally, precisely composed. But I was aware, in a way I was careful not to show, that every word I delivered was simultaneously the thing protecting my daughter and the thing dismantling whatever future she had believed she was building. When the judge asked whether I had concluded my testimony, I took a measured breath, looked at Marcus steadily, and said, "You chose the wrong family to deceive." That sentence reached Natalie in a way that nothing else had. Something in her expression shifted, a finality, a grief, and beneath it, the first faint outline of release. The verdict was never genuinely in question after that day. The evidence was substantial, coherent, and presented without weakness. Marcus was convicted on multiple counts of financial fraud and related federal charges. The judge sentenced him to 14 years in federal prison, the sentence structured to remove any early release provisions. Natalie filed for divorce the following week. The grief that followed was real, and it was significant. She moved back home, and for a while the house held a particular kind of quiet that comes after something irreversible has happened. We spent long evenings on the back porch in conversation, some of it about Marcus, much of it about things we had never fully discussed before. She asked me about my past, about the years I had kept sealed away from her. I told her honestly that I had walked away from that world because I wanted her childhood to be untouched by it. I never wanted those cases, those threats, that pressure to have any proximity to her life. But when Marcus put her at genuine legal and financial risk, and when innocent people continued to lose everything because of him, standing aside was no longer something I was willing to do. She understood. And then, slowly, she began to move forward. She returned to university, completed her degree with distinction, and within the following year had taken on a volunteer role at a local organization supporting women navigating the aftermath of financial and emotional abuse. Watching her redirect her pain into something purposeful, watching her become someone who could walk into a room and offer strength rather than receive it, was the most meaningful thing I have ever witnessed. Marcus sent correspondence from prison on several occasions. Natalie returned every piece unopened. On the day the final judgment was formally entered, the judge found a moment to speak with me privately outside the courtroom. He told me he respected what I had done and what it had cost. It was a brief exchange, but it settled something in me that had been unsettled for a long time. A full year has passed since that morning. Natalie is doing genuinely well. She has work that engages her, friendships that sustain her, and a steadiness about her now that wasn't there before. Harder won than it should have had to be, but real. She's still living at home while she prepares for the next chapter, and she's approaching it with clarity and intention. I never expected to step back into that courtroom world. I had made my peace with leaving it behind. But I am grateful, without reservation, that I was in a position to act when it mattered, and that when the moment came, I didn't hesitate. Sometimes being the father your child needs means revealing parts of yourself you buried long ago. That morning, when the room fell silent and every person turned to face me, became the pivot point that gave Natalie her life back. If you're a parent watching this, trust what you feel when something is wrong. You don't need certainty to stay alert. You need to be paying attention, and you need to be ready to act when the moment demands it. If this story moved you or stayed with you, leave a comment. I'd genuinely like to know. Would you surface a hidden past to protect your child? Share this with any parent who needs to hear it. Thank you for watching all the way through. I'm Daniel, and this is my true story. Protect your family. Trust your instincts. Never be afraid to stand up for what's right when the cost of staying silent is too high. Stay strong. I'll see you in the next one.